finding there. He just didn't happen to be much of a warrior himself, so if he had come up against Roman troops with that scheme, he'd have been annihilated, which in fact they were. So it doesn't surprise one that given the battle plan of the kind outlined in the war scroll that they came to grief. But never mind, the pious enthusiasm of that scroll is incredible to behold. And the whole point again of column 11 is to interpret the messianic prophecy in terms of Daniel, Son of Man, coming on the clouds of heaven, heavenly host coming down to fight in these people's camps, because these people are so pure, and that's the point of their purity in the desert, are so pure that the angels will not fear to tread in their camps. If they are polluted, if they're fornicating, that's why if we have drinkers and fornicators like we have in this group here, in our camp here, the heavenly host, and that's no aspersion, I'm happy to have all kinds of people in this camp.
Don't forget the latrines.
Right.
Too close
in any case, if you are polluted in any way, then the heavenly host would not come and fight for you. The heavenly host would not join your camps. Why? Because they would not be able to go back up to heaven when they were done. Because you would have polluted them with manly, earthly, or womanly, earthly pollution. And I say, where'd they get this idea? I don't know. I wasn't in their brains. I don't know where they got this idea. But they did have this idea that these people were going to come down and the Messiah was going to be part of that. And I think, why am I talking about that? This heavenly visitation. Now, some people say this visitation is the procreation of some seed, some messianic plant, some messianic root, some messianic shoot. Also possible. But whether that also entails a doctrine like the Son of God, I think we have to draw the line on here. I can conceive that they thought that there was going to be some heavenly planting here of some kind that had some miraculous or supernatural meaning to it. But whether this meant an actual Son of God in the Hellenistic Zeus-type sense, I don't think that was in their vocabulary. Which is why they just speak here of a messianic, of a visitation. I think it is messianic, because the plant springs from Israel and Aaron. And later on we speak about the Messiah or Messiahs from Israel and Aaron. So he visits them and he caused a plant root to spring. You do have some indication of what a lot of you are interested in, a generation of a messianic figure in the first column of the Damascus document, right off. So he does visit the earth, and there is a generation of some planting, and the plant root symbolism, as you know, is very messianic symbolism from Aaron and Israel, later referred to in this document as a Messiah or Messiahs. And this plant or root is going to inherit his land and prosper on the good things of this earth. And then they saw their guilt, he says iniquity, and recognized that they were guilty men. I have to say, they perceived their iniquity and recognized they were guilty. They saw that they were sinners and they repented of their sin. And if you want to go over to the community rule, it's the same kind of thing going on in the community rule. And it's the same kind of thing in the early Gospels, that John preached a way in the wilderness, and he preached forgiveness of sin in the wilderness. Here, basically, it's not the same vocabulary, but it's exactly the same thing. They saw their sin and recognized that they were guilty men, i.e., they repented. They saw their sin and they repented. Let's put it in familiar language, and it is exactly parallel to what we know from other quarters as far as language goes. Whether the meaning is the same, I can't tell you. Here's the 20 years problem that I told you about before. I don't want to dwell on it again because we're never going to get very far in this text if I do. So they were like blind men groping for the way, another important vocabulary terminology of this group, the way, all through the Damascus document, community rule, we have the way, and the way symbolism, and of course in the New Testament, and the word in Hebrew is derech. And I think you have to understand that in the book of Acts, Christianity is called the way. People often ask, what was the name Christianity went by in Palestine before it became Christianity overseas? One of the names, anyway, is the way. And any way symbolism or terminology is important. Now, God observed their deeds. Now, up above, he said, they know righteousness and consider the works of God. And here he said, God observed their deeds. It's exactly the same word as above. Why does he change the translation? You ask Worm. I don't know why he changes the translation, but he does. And I think it's to confuse you, because he doesn't want to show you the consistency of the vocabulary here. It should read, and God observed their works. But if God observed their works, we're getting into dangerous territory. If God just observes your deeds in English, we're not in any dangerous territory. It's just a lot of hocus pocus. But works, we all know the significance of works righteousness, and we're in familiar terrain again. Yes, it's the same as above that he did translate works, ma'asim. Here he translates it as deeds. Now the above is God's works. This is man's work. So God watched their works, and that they sought him with a whole heart, and then he raised up for them a teacher. Now notice, the teacher, if it is true that we're right here, comes 20 years after the root of planting. And the root of planting may be the community itself, but the community certainly had a leader. And it looks like and it comes 20 years after the visitation of God on this earth in some way. God visited the earth in some way. And it looks like, we have the 20 years is the only problem I've ever had with this text in putting it into a Jewish Christian framework. And the problem I've dealt with there is if it is a James type teacher, and I don't say it is, then, we have a break of some 20 years before he takes over and takes control of things. Again, I don't want to get too specific here, but we know that James did control things from the 40s to the 60s, certainly in the 50s and 60s in Jerusalem. And I don't know if it doesn't relate to that, it could relate to something else, but if it relates to something else,